The story begins in Sicily, a small island at the crossroads of the Mediterranean, a place conquered by Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Normans, and Spaniards. Each ruler came and went, but none built strong institutions. When Italy unified in the 19th century, Sicily remained poor, fragmented, and lawless. The new Italian government was distant and corrupt. Justice was something you could buy, not something you could expect. And in that vacuum, a new kind of power emerged, not a government, but a network. A brotherhood that offered what the state could not: protection, enforcement, and silence. The first mafiosi weren't gangsters. They were middlemen. They enforced contracts for citrus growers, protected shipments, and collected debts. In a land where courts didn't work and police couldn't be trusted, they ensured that business flowed. But their protection came with a price, a tax called pizzo. Refuse to pay, and your oranges rotted in the fields, your workers disappeared, and your family lived in fear. Over time, protection became extortion, and the mafia evolved from a service into a system. By the late 1800s, every corner of Sicilian commerce paid tribute, from the docks of Palermo to the hills of Corleone. The mafia didn't just steal, it managed. It mediated disputes, controlled elections, and took a cut of everything that moved. It became a parallel economy, invisible but absolute. And like any efficient business, it diversified: cattle, citrus, land, and smuggling. Money was reinvested, never idle. Violence became the branding. Corruption was the business model. Then came Benito Mussolini. In the 1920s, the fascist dictator vowed to crush the mafia once and for all. He sent his iron-fisted prefect, Cesare Mori, to Sicily with orders to restore the authority of the state. Thousands were arrested, many fled. For a while it worked. The mafia went underground, but it never died. It waited. 2 decades later, war brought opportunity. When Allied forces invaded Sicily in 1943, they needed local allies who knew the terrain, the ports, and the loyalties. They found them in the mafia. American intelligence, desperate for cooperation, turned to Lucky Luciano, the New York mob boss with Sicilian roots. In exchange for his help securing the docks of New York and smoothing the invasion of Sicily, Luciano's sentence was quietly commuted. The mafia was back, legitimized by war. After the liberation, Sicily was flooded with reconstruction money. Contracts for roads, housing, and infrastructure poured in. Billions flowed from Rome and Washington to rebuild southern Italy. The mafia inserted itself everywhere. Politicians needed votes. Contractors needed protection. Banks needed intermediaries. The old rural gangs transformed into businessmen in tailored suits. They built companies, won public tenders, and laundered funds through real estate. The mafia had evolved from gunners to financiers. By the 1950s, Palermo was booming. Cranes filled the skyline. Concrete poured day and night. Locals called it Il Sacco di Palermo. The sack of Palermo because the mafia was literally looting the city through construction. Entire neighborhoods were demolished and rebuilt with public money funneled through mob-linked firms. The profits were astronomical. And while the world celebrated Italy's economic miracle, a shadow miracle unfolded beneath it: the creation of a private capital network that stretched far beyond Sicily. Then came heroin. Morphine base from Turkey was refined in Sicilian labs, shipped through Marseille, and sold in the United States. By the mid-1960s, the French connection supplied nearly all of America's heroin. The profits, hundreds of millions, needed to be hidden. Cash was bulky, incriminating, and useless unless it could be cleaned. So the mafia mastered a new art: financial invisibility. They invested in Swiss and Luxembourg banks, funneled profits through offshore companies and anonymous trusts, and bought hotels in Palermo, vineyards in Tuscany, and shell farms in Panama. The true power of money, they realized, wasn't in spending it, it was in hiding it. The 1970s were the high point. The mafia had friends in powerful places, not just politicians but bankers. And one bank became the heart of the storm: Banco Ambrosiano. It was Italy's largest private bank, with deep ties to the Vatican Bank, officially known as the Institute for Religious Works. On paper, the Vatican Bank was a charitable institution. In reality, it was a financial black hole, a sovereign entity immune from Italian law, able to move money across borders under the guise of faith. At the center of this web stood Roberto Calvi, God's banker. Calvi built a vast network of offshore companies in Panama, Luxembourg, and the Bahamas, moving billions in secret funds. Some came from political slush money, some from mafia profits, and some, investigators later discovered, from the Vatican itself. In 1982, it all collapsed. Banco Ambrosiano imploded under $1.3 billion in missing funds. Calvi fled Italy in fear. Days later, he was found hanging beneath Blackfriars Bridge in London, his pockets filled with cash and bricks. The coroner called it suicide. Most believed it was execution. The Mafia doesn't file lawsuits. The scandal revealed a truth few wanted to admit. The lines between organized crime, politics, and finance had long since blurred. The Vatican quietly paid restitution but never admitted guilt. Dozens of officials resigned. But the system, the machinery of shadow finance, survived. After Banco Ambrosiano's fall, the Mafia evolved again. The violence of the 1980s, assassinations, bombings, and bloody clan wars, brought unwanted attention. It was bad for business. So a new generation emerged, the white-collar Mafia. They traded bullets for balance sheets. They invested in stock markets, real estate, and global trade. The money became cleaner, the methods more sophisticated. By the 1990s, Italy's Anti-Mafia Commission estimated that organized crime generated more than $100 billion a year, roughly 7% of Italy's GDP, that made the Mafia collectively Italy's largest enterprise. But unlike Fiat or ENI, it paid no taxes and faced no regulation. It operated entirely through cash offshore holdings and shell companies. Even as authorities cracked down, the money simply moved elsewhere. London became a favorite. So did Switzerland, Luxembourg, and the Caribbean. Each crackdown taught the Mafia how to adapt, how to disguise ownership behind layers of shell corporations and proxies. By the 2000s, Mafia wealth was so deeply embedded in legitimate business that economists struggled to tell where clean Italy ended and criminal Italy began. And it wasn't just Sicily anymore. The 'Ndrangheta from Calabria, the Camorra from Naples, and countless foreign cartels all adopted the same methods. They invested in global markets, bought luxury properties, and became shareholders in legitimate companies. Dirty money had gone multinational. Today, law enforcement agencies estimate that up to 5% of global GDP is laundered annually, over $2 trillion. Some of it comes from traditional crime, but much of it flows from corruption, tax evasion, and corporate fraud. Yet the structure remains the same blueprint the Sicilian Mafia built a century ago: anonymous ownership, untraceable transfers, and silence for sale. The irony is that what began as organized crime now looks a lot like organized finance. The techniques pioneered by mob accountants, layered transactions, offshore entities, bearer shares, are the same tools used by billionaires, corporations, and even governments. The Mafia didn't corrupt capitalism, it understood it. Look closely and the parallels are everywhere. The Mafia controlled ports. Corporations control supply chains, the Mafia extorted through fear. Modern finance does it through debt. The Mafia laundered cash through real estate. Investors inflate housing markets the same way, just legally. The difference is only paperwork. What the Sicilian Mafia built wasn't just a criminal empire. It was an economic philosophy. Money doesn't care where it comes from, only where it goes. Their story isn't a relic of the past, it is a mirror of the present. When oligarchs hide fortunes in London, when politicians route money through offshore trusts, when corporations shift profits to avoid taxes, they are using the same shadow networks the Mafia designed. The names have changed. The system hasn't. Even the Vatican, after decades of scandal, still struggles with transparency. In 2020, new reports revealed that hundreds of millions in church funds were still invested through offshore accounts and luxury real estate. The ghosts of Banco Ambrosiano still echo in the corridors of power. And yet the Mafia itself has grown quieter. The bloodshed of the 1980s is mostly gone. The real dons today wear suits, not leather jackets. They sit on boards, not in back rooms. The violence is financial, silent, precise, and invisible. Money laundering has replaced murder as the path to control. The real godfather was never the man with a gun, it was the accountant. The one who knew how to make dirty money disappear. The Mafia's true innovation wasn't intimidation, it was integration. They learned that the best way to hide criminal capital was to mix it with legitimate capital until the two became indistinguishable, and that's exactly what they did. The lesson is uncomfortable but clear. Systems of power don't need legality to survive, only structure. The Mafia built one of the most efficient private economies in modern history because it understood a fundamental truth about money. The laws are negotiable, but liquidity is not. The Sicilian Mafia may have begun in poverty, but it ended as a master of capital. Its shadow still lingers in every anonymous account, every offshore trust, every investment fund that moves money without accountability. They showed the world how to weaponize trust, how to corrupt transparency, and how to turn secrecy itself into an asset. They didn't invent greed. They perfected it. And perhaps that's the final irony. The Mafia didn't destroy capitalism, it completed it. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. Because history doesn't just repeat, it accumulates. Follow the money and you'll find the truth. I'll show you where to look.